Okay, well, I guess we've started live, and I'm just waiting here for see if anybody shows up. Maybe someone will, maybe not. Who knows? I did declare this on very short notice, so I don't know. At the least, I'll be able to broadcast this later for later viewing, and I guess if no one shows up to chat, then we can. Oh, Cokie Angel, how you doing? Okay, we got one person. How you doing this evening? Okay, Cokie Angel is here with us, and we're just gonna wait a few more minutes to see, if we get some people to fill up the room. And we're gonna have a very good discussion. The Only Jays. Hey, what's up? Okay, we got 2 people so far. Is it snowing where you guys are? It's like starting to snow here. I haven't heard like the weather reports, so I don't know what's gonna happen, like how bad it's gonna be, but hoping it's not gonna be too bad. But I already did my shopping and everything to make sure I don't gotta go out like tomorrow if it's really disgusting. So we're just gonna wait a few more minutes and see who else we get to join us. Oh wow, okay, so I guess you guys got it more. It just started snowing here like within the past hour. Oh wow, it's a state of emergency for real? Hey Morena, what's up? Hey sweetie, I hope you're gonna join me on join us on the discussion here tonight, man. I'm gonna keep it safe, right? I'm gonna keep it. We don't do messy on our channel. So I hope you'll, come in and drop your pearls of wisdom, Wow, so it's a state of emergency. Yeah, me too. I got my food stocked up. Hey, Viva. Hey, sweetie, you're gonna join in on the chat? Well, not the chat. I want you to join in on the live stream. So here, let me get the channel. How do I do this now? Copy the clipboard. Is that how I do it? Copied. Okay. And I don't know how to pin it though. Just when I thought I figured everything out. Well, we got 4 people. All righty. So listen, you guys, as you come in, make sure you hit the like, okay? Give the stream that thumbs up. So I'm really working to get myself together as far as putting out content, and live streams is the best way to do it, because I don't have to spend any time editing. So let's see. I guess we'll go ahead and get started now. I know Fighter Complex is having his stream, but hey, it is what it is. So, like last week, we had this. I saw this story in the news about this woman in Harlem. She had just come home from work and she stopped off at a liquor store to get something, and she was followed into the store by these guys, and one of the guys asked her if they could, buy whatever liquor for her. And she was like, no, thank you. I'm good. And then one of the guys, he gets irate and starts saying something to the effect of, oh, you think you're better than us, or something like that, And that's when it gets like really crazy, because when she goes outside, these two guys follow her and they beat her up. And one of the guys goes as far as to try to bite her eyes out. And that's just like so insane. And apparently, the guys who did this, this isn't the first time they've done something like this, because there was a guy outside and he said to the woman, I would run if I were you, because they've done this before. And so what ensued was that there was a big protest outside the liquor store in Harlem, as well they should be. There was a guy, I can't remember his name now, but he put out a bounty leading to any information that would lead in the apprehension of these guys, But what I saw that really, really disturbed me even more than this, and, listen, there's no way to downplay what happened to this woman whatsoever. It's really horrible. But what I found to be really disturbing is the fact that within certain segments of the community, there are people who are trying to take this and spin this narrative that this is the way Black men treat Black women. And I've watched several videos on it, and people are talking about, well, Black men are the only men that don't protect their women. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, why does it always have to go that way, Obviously, the people who did this are not right in head. It's one thing, right? As bad as it is to have the balls to try to rob somebody, right? And to beat them up, but then you go and try to bite their eyes out. Like, who the fuck does that? That's just a little bit extra. That goes above and beyond just basic criminality to like criminally insane. And what I want to know is, why is it, Maceo, good to see you, man. I hope you can jump in on, the discussion. I'm going to put the link in there soon. But the question that I have is that when we see manifestation of mental illness, why is it that we don't recognize it for what it is and we automatically jump to, you see, this is how Black people are? Like, for example, in the 70s when I was a kid, right, we had Son of Sam. I'm sure everybody has heard of the Son of Sam, serial killer. When he was finally caught, nobody was like, you see, that's how these Jewish men are. When Jeffrey Dahmer was caught, nobody was like, you see, that's how those white men are, But anytime there's something that happens in the African American community, or the person turns out to be a person of African descent, right? Automatically, the whole community is lumped together and put in, that's the representative, the automatic default representative of everybody within the group. And what I want to know is, like, why do we have that knee-jerk reaction that we go to that extreme? Let me read the comment. I just don't understand how no one jumped into her defense. This happened in the neighborhood and they know they do this, then it could have been prevented. Absolutely. So that's something else that I want to talk about. Ultimately, where I want to go with this is I really want to have a real discussion and examine this issue, right? So that's one aspect of it. Why is it that Apparently, this was not the first time it happened, but no one said anything. No one came forward. Why is it that we have this situation happening in our communities? Okay, Morena again. Truth, we from the Bronx, you know, a lot of randoms would have kicked their ass unless things changed since I left. Well, yeah, I mean, listen, it's not a new thing to have a report like this happen, right? Where someone is attacked when there's a lot of people around, and you ask yourself, why didn't anybody say anything? Why didn't anybody do anything? Why didn't anybody get involved? And I think it's just one of the negative factors of life in urban environments where there's a big amount of anonymity, right? I mean, even though we live in very high population areas, hey, Blood Moon, what's up? 9 times out of 10, a lot of times we don't even know our next door neighbor living in the next apartment beside us, you know? So I'm wondering, to me, it would seem that the reason why people tend to not get involved is out of fear, because you're worried about the consequences of what could possibly happen because people out here are insane. Okay, let me just scroll up here. Well, I guess all of you there, you're seeing the messages, but I just want to highlight some of the responses here. Okay, regardless of MXC, thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Blood Moon, nice to see you here. Regardless what people say racially, the fact is that it's black men attacking black women, and the truth is that no woman should be treated this way. Well, yeah, that is true. I absolutely agree with you on that. But the thing is that I'm saying is, why is it that we're not recognizing the fact that this is a symptom of mental illness, criminality, and that those individuals have to be dealt with? Why do we jump? Why do they make that big jump now that all black men, right? All black men are guilty of beating black women. All black men are to blame. Like, why do we have to go that extra? Why do we have to be so extra in, that exaggeration? So I tell you what, I'm going to put the link in the box. And listen, I don't want to sit here and be a talking head. One of the purposes of my channel is to be able to facilitate cross-cultural communication and to really come up with solutions. So I'm going to put the link here, and people, come on in and let's discuss this, and listen, if you're afraid, I don't keep messy drama on my channel. Everyone who comes in here, I mean, even if you have an opposing view from my own, you will be safe, you will be respected. As long as you're respectful to me, I'll be respectful to you, and I'm certainly not going to let anybody else disrespect you, okay? So, people, I've posted the link. I'm going to post it again. I'd like some of you guys to come in and join me because, listen, I know I get accused of being a Mr. Know-It-All, but I'm really not. So I don't want to be a talking head. I want to have, exchange. I want to have communication. So people, join in. Keep me company here. No snitch culture. Yeah. Well, Maseo, yeah. So that's something. Maseo, I'd love it if you would jump in, and we could discuss this idea of the no snitch culture. When do we, how do we get to this place, and how is it serving us? How is it serving us to have a no snitch culture when it's like people in our community are being victimized, but there doesn't seem to be any, okay, you don't want to snitch to the police, but then what are you going to come up with to keep the community safe? Are you going to have a community patrol, or are you going to take, have like a little security, detail, or what? So what's going to take the place? If you don't want to be a snitch, what's going to take the place of the police so that we keep our community safe? Okay, Morena says, exactly. Usually men are left to kill themselves, but man on woman, you don't come from that era where people let that happen. Well, here's the thing. From my experience, right? I think that violence against women is nothing new. I think it probably gets more headline coverage when it's like men attacking each other, men fighting each other, men killing each other. But I don't recall a period of time in this country's history where women were ever safe from violence. I don't recall that ever being the case. Let's see. These jerks wearing gang colors are dangerous. People don't want to get involved because these animals have no problem shooting and doing 25 to life. Something, I think that's a very good point. Because when I was researching, this situation, I did see an article where, and I posted it on my Instagram, where there was a situation, this man and woman were having an altercation. This man was like really beating the crap out of this woman, and he stepped in, in his neighborhood. This was like his neighbor, right? And he stepped in to break it up. And he ended up getting shot, and killed. And so I think that is, and this is, okay, in a residential area, right? Suburban residential area. Now, multiply that when you're living in a situation where it's a very high population density and you really don't know the people around you like that. I think you're going to be less prone to step in because you don't know what's going on, number one. And these days, from I want to say like the mid 80s, it's become a much more violent society, you never know who's carrying a weapon. You don't know who's carrying a gun or a knife, and you might end up being, being the victim of some kind of violent retaliation. A little girl got snatched and the man was trying to take her to a second location. He got beat up badly and they called the cops. Yeah, that is true. You do see, having said all that, you do see things like that. Like I remember, for example, in my neighborhood, across the street from me, there was, and I was looking out, I just so happened to be looking out my window at the right time. There was this old lady and she was walking down the street and she had like her shopping bag or whatever. And this guy attacked her and, knocked her to the ground and snatched her bag. And the guys who were on the street, and this was like a mixed group of guys, African American, Latino, um, Egyptians, they chased this dude down. He didn't even get a block away. He didn't even get half a block away. They jumped his ass and they like, yo, they dusted him up and they held him there until the police came. So yeah, it does happen, but you know, far too often we do see situations like this where horrible things are happening and no one wants to get involved. Okay, MXC says this is it, mental illness, and this is the blame game, and it's not all black men. Exactly. It's the ones in the video. Exactly. And that's the thing, you know, that's the point. This is not all black men, but we do have certain voices within the community who automatically they want to make this about all black men. And I just want to kind of explore that, you know, like, why is it? And is it true? You know, something, not just why is that, but is it true? You know, this idea that every other group of men is out there protecting their women except black men. Akintunde of the Haitians, hey, glad to see you here, brother. Listen, I'm going to put the link in the chat again. I would like you guys to join me so that we can have a discussion. Because if we don't have a discussion, I'm not going to be here very long, you know? I don't want to be a talking head, man. Seriously. I don't want to be a talking head. I want to have discussion. Okay, so, hey, Flor de Oro, what's up, man? Cookie Angel, let's see. Oh, I was looking for somebody's comment to share. Okay, Cookie Angel says, I do the same. If I can't assess a threat or if I'm with family, like, you know, I will say this. I did have an experience last month, right? And to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't do anything because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was going on. I was coming from Jersey City. This was in the World Trade Center. Like when you're coming from the World Trade Center and you're going to like the 4 and 5 train. And I saw this man, this guy, he had a bicycle and he was going to go through the door and he started arguing with this woman. And next thing I know, it's like the woman is down on the floor and this dude is like beating the hell out of her. And he's saying like, you know, she's like, he beat me. And he's like, yeah, bitch, but you spit on me. And like, so I'm like, what the hell is going on? I didn't know what to do. And, you know, I'm thinking to myself, like, is this guy just like assaulting this woman? But then I'm like, but then if she spat on him or if she hit him, then like, I don't know, like, how do I don't want to see him beating this woman, but like, I don't know what happened. So I was reluctant to step in. MXC, here you go. Hey man, what's up?
Hello. There's a delay between my TV and my phone. So hey everybody. Hello Christina. Hello Blood Moon. Hello Truth Teacher. Truth Teacher, you come to Jersey City often? I live in Jersey City.
I live in Jersey City.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, where are you?
In Jersey City. I don't tell my address.
Well, hey, maybe
I live in the Heights.
Oh, you're in the Heights. Yeah, I go walking in the Heights a lot.
Yeah, I live in the Heights.
Yeah. I like the Heights. You know, I like. You know what I like about the Heights? It's like you have like those main streets where you have like the shops and stuff, but You got those little side streets where you can really, certain sections you get that suburban feel.
Jersey City Heights has become very expensive lately. I mean, it was first Manhattan, Hoboken, downtown Jersey City. Now it's the Heights, and
Yeah,
slowly becoming General Square. And then it's going to become the Hill, what people know as the Hill, Bergen Hill. What they want to change it now, the Greenville section.
yeah.
It's still very rough. If I don't know if people remember, that's where that shootout happened. That anti-Semitic shootout
Oh,
happened.
Greenville. Yeah,
We're not
yeah,
gonna, you are not gonna get into that because that's a whole different story.
yeah.
But what I'm gonna say, I didn't agree with you, and I think I wrote it incorrectly. The whole thing about the mental illness. There's
Mhm.
too many of those guys for it to be mental illness. I think they were drinking, getting high, and decided to attack this girl for no apparent reason.
Yeah. Well,
And well, they're gonna get it too. Once they get caught, they're gonna be in Rikers for a while.
I really hope so. But to me, the thing is, you know, I use this term mental illness, and I think a lot of times we don't realize just how pervasive mental illness really is. Listen, there's a lot of people that are suffering from, psychological and emotional problems, and they, don't know how to handle it. I mean, the fact that you're getting drunk or high to me says that you're running away from something to begin with, right?
Yeah, but to be honest with you, there is no excuse. There's no excuse, and society is to the point that they really don't care. I
Well,
mean, you're gonna go to Bellevue. This guy, what they're gonna do? They're gonna cry and scream and go try to go to Bellevue? Nah, they're gonna go to Rikers.
well, listen, I think there's degrees, right? But I mean, like, come on, to try to bite somebody's eyes out, like, who the fuck does that? You know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm saying. Like, that is just like, I can
And
see.
I feel sorry for that girl too because she don't look like she's about anything either. She looked like she was just trying to get something out of
Yeah,
store and go home.
she was just trying to go home, and then out of nowhere, this happens. And listen, even if it is mental illness, the way I look at it is whether you were just that ratchet or this was truly mental illness, you do not need to be walking up and down in the street amongst normal people. You need to be off the streets. Whether they put you in a mental institution or they put you, upstate, you don't need to be around normal people. You need to be off.
The thing about it, truth teacher, is that there's a lot of people with mental illness. You can't just lock everybody up. To be honest with you,
But when it
there's a
gets
lot of
to,
bipolar people running around. You can't lock all of them up.
but when it gets to the point where you're in date, when you're well, you do have a situation where you have what they call what is it? What is it they call it? There's a term for it. It's mental. What is it? What is it? Damn, I'm drawing a blank right now. But in other
Nothing
words,
frauds.
like criminal, it's criminal insanity. You know, like you're a criminally minded, insane person.
They
So,
don't give that to a lot of people anymore because a lot of people claim that when they get arrested for things, it's
mhm.
very difficult for you to be criminally insane.
Listen, like I said, I don't know what it is, but I would definitely say that people like this, they. I mean, okay, so let me ask you, what do you think should be done with these guys?
They should be tarred and feathered.
Yeah, but we don't do that good stuff anymore.
First of all, hopefully they're not gang members because to be honest with you, I mean they need to be handled, and they might be handled by their own gang actually too when they go to jail
Yeah,
because what they did was like really negative. I know I've been around a lot of gang members and that shit don't fly. Especially Latin gangs, that shit don't fly. You do that stuff like that and you go to jail, you're gonna have to answer the higher up and they're gonna be like, what
well,
the fuck are you doing?
exactly. Something that's very true. What happens to people when they go to jail? People who are guilty of crimes where it's like child abuse, sexual abuse, rape, things like that. When they get in prison, they don't fare very well, you know,
No, they
because
don't.
there's a lot of people who are in prison who were the victims of, like, sexual molestation, who were the
Yeah,
victims of,
a lot of those kids
you
are,
know
because that's why they end up
yeah,
in jail, because they do things out, they can't fit into society, and a lot of them have kids and they're not home with their kids. So when they find out you've been touching little kids, little girls, they're gonna handle you. And they're gonna handle
yeah,
you quick.
yeah. And but like, my bigger question, and I don't want anyone to be offended, because I'm really not trying to offend anyone, and I'm not trying to downplay the severity of it, right? But what upsets me is that instead of recognizing it for what it is, now we're going to apply that to all black men.
It's not
What?
all black men, because I'm gonna tell you something. That's a New York mentality. I remember one day my cousin moved from New Jersey to Washington Heights, and I was walking with him, and he said something to a female, and he said, and the girl wouldn't talk back to him because he was yelling at her from across the street, and then he said, "Oh, you think you're special? What? You shit diamonds?" And I hit him.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as he said that, I hit him. I was like, "Yo, you can't say that. You're my cousin. When you say that to a female, we're related. You make me look bad." I'm
Mm-hmm.
standing right next to you, speaking this stupid shit to this girl, yelling at her from across the street. Like, a female's really gonna pay attention to you, that you're
Exactly.
yelling at her from across the street. And on top of that, you start saying the stupid stuff. And this is a person, and I really got mad because this is a person who was gifted and talented, and he
Mm-hmm.
always got these high grades in high school. It's just, he moved to New York, you started hanging out with these people, and you became, all of a sudden, you became retarded or
Yeah.
something like that. And I'm like, I hit him. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, are you really gonna yell at a girl? Like, if you have no class, it's nothing like that.
Well, I think the real issue that we need to ask ourselves, right? Because the fact of the matter, and when I say, like, applying it to all black men, it's not everyone that's doing it, but there definitely are voices on YouTube who are all about that, right? And from what I can see, the reality of the fact is that this is not something that is limited to inner city black men or any particular group. This is something that is really pervasive worldwide. Like, for example, um, in Puerto Rico recently, they just declared a state of emergency on femicide, because ever since the situation with the hurricane, the incidence of violence against women has skyrocketed in Puerto Rico to the point where they're declaring it a crisis. I haven't looked into anything really in depth, but apparently there's an issue in the Dominican Republic as well with femicide. I know definitely in Honduras, it's a big situation where
The
women are getting killed because men, like, they're probably attracted to them or whatever, and they don't want them. But also in
I
India, there's a problem. It's worldwide. It's a worldwide problem. So
You
why
know
is
what?
it?
I'm gonna make a comment on the Dominican one.
Hmm.
Are you done?
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
The Dominican one, what's really going on is and I spoke to Christina about this on the
Hmm.
side. What's going on with DR is El Chapeo has really damaged the country. A lot of a lot of guys getting very possessive,
Yeah.
and a lot of girls are like, okay, I date you, but I'll be with somebody else later. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of these guys are getting very possessive, especially to the broke guys. Because I've
Hmm.
heard about people talking about this on the radio too, more educated people more than me. But they said that, especially with a lot of broke guys, a lot of girls end up dating they'll date you, but they'll also date a wealthy guy on the side. And a lot of these broke guys can't take that. So they start acting out.
Okay.
And and you know what? And there's also cases of females doing that in that country too. I know of a case of a girl who had 2 kids with this one guy. The guy starts cheating on her. She knifed him up. But a lot of that is control. A lot of these guys get desperate. A lot of these girls really don't want to be stuck with a loser, or they see him as a loser after a while, and they start to chase. These guys start to chase this girl. There was this one that happened not too long ago where the guy ended up throwing acid or hired 2 other guys to throw acid on the girl's face.
Yeah.
And her face literally melted and she became blind.
Well, I've heard of situations like that happening. Where was it? In Pakistan and India. They for a while,
and then
like
Egypt too, because I had an Egyptian girlfriend.
Yeah. I heard a few cases like that in Egypt, but there was a while where in Pakistan it was almost like an epidemic. There were, it would usually revolve around like some guy wants to marry a girl, she doesn't want to marry him, she wants to marry somebody else. And so to get revenge, like, well, if I can't have you, nobody will, and
yes, that's basically how it always happens.
Yeah. So then, is this
If I can't have you, nobody else can have you.
So, okay, the situation you were talking about in DR, right? Do you think that this is something that you find more prevalently in lower income areas? Like there's some kind of economic pressure that forces guys or contributes guys to
Yes,
have
I
it?
think so. What the people?
Yeah, you still there?
Damn, you cut off. Yeah, I'm
No,
still
you
here. Is
still
that
there.
I have my phone. I'm gonna have to let you go though, because I have about 20 minutes to charge in this stupid phone, and you know how
I thought that,
iPhones are.
since we're both in Jersey City, man, we gotta like meet up sometime in Journal Square,
Hello,
Yeah, I'm here.
hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
I said since we both like go out here in
Hello.
Jersey City, man, you can hear me? Uh-oh. I think the aliens got him.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
You can hear me fine?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
All right, great. I said since we both live in Jersey City, we gotta like meet up and go I don't know, man, like check out whatever's open in Jersey City, man, like get a bite to eat or something. Or maybe
I'm not
I'll
going
come.
out because I'll tell you later. But I'm under the weather, and I'm not really stepping out in this cold. It's too cold.
No,
I'll
I
step
don't
out when the
mean,
sun comes out in spring.
I don't mean no. I mean when the weather is good, man. I listen. It's a good
When,
thing that I did my shopping yesterday because I ain't leaving my house for nothing with this cold snap. I'm not doing it. But thanks for adding.
I gotta move to Florida already.
Listen, I love the weather, but I don't know about Florida though. Florida ain't it for me. I'm sorry. Nah, I got family down in Florida. I'm sorry, Florida ain't popping like that. I don't see myself moving to Florida. But I would like to be some. You know what my dream is to like get a house down in back in Jamaica and just like chill out. Like when the winter comes, like go down to my house down there in the Caribbean and come back in the springtime. Hold on a second. Cookie
Hang up
says,
and come back in.
Black people have to stop separating Latino nations. The same issue we face here, Black Latinos face over there. Well, yeah. That's the thing that I'm saying. Is like I don't see this as being a black issue, and the myth that's being circulated around in certain circles is that every other group of men takes care of their women except for black men. Black men are the only ones who don't protect their women. And that is not true. I know that from experience. Violence against women is something that it's a global problem. And I think, M had a really good point that I think a lot of times it's economics is linked to it, because let's just face it, man, when your money ain't right, that's stress. You are stressed the hell out. And I think that there are a lot of people, they don't know how to deal with their stress in creative ways, in responsible ways, so they resort to doing things, like violence, like instead of saying, okay, I'm in a tight spot here. What can I do to better my situation? I think people just, they take it out on the people who are closest to them. 9 times out of 10, it's another family member, right? Or someone that you're in a relationship with, or your kids. They end up being the ones who pay the consequences for whatever emotional disturbance is going on. I was speaking with one of my cousins, and she was telling me, that she has some friends, and the amount of stuff, like when she was growing up, what she witnessed, the amount of abuse that, she saw happening was unbelievable. And, when you track it back, it was a situation where this guy, one of the things that happened is this guy, his father was a really serious alcoholic. And he was extremely violent, extremely violent to his kids, like beat the crap out of them on a regular basis. But then I have to ask myself, okay, so this dude was an alcoholic, but what the hell happened in his life to make him resort to alcoholism, So at some point, there's a psychological or emotional trauma happening, because you don't become an alcoholic because that shit tastes good. You know what I'm saying? You become an alcoholic or a drug addict because you're trying to medicate yourself against the pain that you've experienced. And we have not learned, I'm going to say most people in general, haven't learned really creative or constructive ways, I guess is the best way to put it. Constructive ways of dealing with whatever pain they've experienced in their lives. And so they resort to these other methods. Now, it's funny because and okay, so this is not in any way to justify or downplay the severity of bad behavior, right? But I think that a lot of people are trying to deal with their pain, their traumas in the best way they know how. And not everybody has the emotional maturity to be able to deal with it in a constructive way. So you might have one person that they experience really horrible things in their life, but for whatever reason, they have a certain amount of strength within themselves so that they can say, okay, well, you know what? My father or my uncle or whatever, my family treated me in a really horrible way. I'm going to make sure that when I have kids, they don't have to experience what I experienced. And then you have other people where, I don't know, I guess maybe they become bitter and it's like, well, if I had to go through it, then everybody else has, like everybody else has to pay because, I went through it. So, what makes them special, I went through it, they're going to go through it too. That's the only way that I can make sense out of it because I've seen the most astounding things happening and I can't wrap my head around it, I hear what you're saying about them being people of color and I agree, but they are not Black. Puerto Rican women and men are mixed. I would not lump them into just being Black. Okay, so Terry Queen, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not saying that Puerto Ricans and Dominicans are doing this because it has nothing to do with racial classification here. The point that I was trying to make is that this type of behavior is not limited only to African American men. I was using Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic as an example because they're also experiencing a crisis within their communities. You see? So for certain voices on YouTube to spin this narrative as if only African American men are doing this, it's disingenuous because it's not true. The reality and the fact of the matter is that this is a crisis worldwide. I haven't looked into any statistics, but I'm sure if I looked into it and I looked in places like the United Kingdom and Ireland, that I would find, similar situations happening when it comes to violence against women. I have friends who are Polish, and they told me that, like alcoholism and the violence and, destruction of the stability of the family life is like it happens a lot. I've had friends from Russia who told me the same thing, so I think a lot of times, how do I put this? I think the mistake that a lot of us make is that we think that our trauma is unique, right? We think that our suffering trumps everybody else's suffering. It's like we're looking for the Pain Olympics, Nobody has suffered like I have suffered, my people have gone through the worst. No one else has gone through what we have gone through. The fact of the matter is that human beings, we all suffer in this life experience. Now, we may not suffer in the same ways, but we all do experience pain. And pain is relative. You may not have the same problems that I have, but you got your own kind of problems, right? Like I was talking about my cousin and what she witnessed in her community, right? Now, as a person of color who grew up in the Bronx, I had a very skewed view of the world, right? Because in New York, you don't really get an accurate perspective on the world, right? Because New York is a very segregated place. And not segregated like it was back in the South, get to the back of the bus, that kind of thing. But when it comes to the level of income And when it comes to demographics in terms of, the makeup of certain neighborhoods, for the most part, the inner cities of New York City, the Bronx, Upper Manhattan, Lower East Side, Queens, Brooklyn, people living in the inner city who are economically struggling tend to be people of color, right? Whereas the majority of the white people that we see tend to be fairly affluent, right? So, for example, like I grew up in the Bronx on the Grand Concourse. The people that were in my community were at that time predominantly Puerto Rican, African American, some West Indian. After a while, we started getting more people coming in from other areas of Latin America and South America. A lot of Guyanese started coming up. This was the time in the mid 80s. A lot of Dominicans started coming up, as well as people from, different countries in Africa. So all we saw was, people of color in economically stressed communities, right? But then you get on the train and you go downtown, to the Upper East Side, it's overwhelmingly white, you know, or people of European descent. And there's such a big, sharp dichotomy in wealth, right? Like if you go down Lexington Avenue, for example, oh, better yet, Fifth Avenue. You start in Fifth Avenue up in Harlem, and you look at the surrounding area, you know that when you're up in Harlem, or that part of Harlem, this is an economically depressed area. You start going downtown, and you get to a certain block, and it's like a night and day difference between this is the ghetto and this is real affluence. You know, you can see it in the way the buildings are taken care of, even the quality of the streetlights. It's very obvious, you know? And so that's the reality. We equate whiteness with affluence and success and an easy life, right? And because they're not struggling economically the same way we are, we assume that they don't have any problems. But the thing is, it's just that it's better hidden. You know, the dysfunctionality within families isn't as blatant and in your face as it is in our communities, but it exists. So it was really surprising, speaking with my cousin, because I had this misperception that, you know, you're in the suburbs, you're white, whatever, you got this great life. And I'm hearing all of these stories about sexual abuse and physical abuse and alcoholism and people, families falling apart. Like we all struggle with this. And, like I want to explore the reasons why, even when we're talking about violence towards women, why? What is the underlying reasons why we have situations where men think that it's okay to be violent against women, and why is that seen as like the go-to? Okay, first of all, you step into a store and you're talking to a woman, and okay, she's not interested in you. Okay, she's not interested in you. Why do you think that it's appropriate for you to take that one step more now and put hands on her? Like that's a little crazy, don't you think? I mean, It says to me that there's almost a sense of entitlement that certain men have, that men owe them a certain amount of attention, right? If I show a woman attention, that like she's obligated to pay me attention back. I don't know. What do you guys think? Hey, Lily, you want to come in and join me? I'm going to put the link. Now, son, come in and join me. Because you're from a totally different society. You're from Japan. So, you have a different perspective, and I'm sure, different experiences. So I'd like you to join in. I just put the link there. I'd appreciate it if you join in and, add to the conversation. Oh my God, you're such a chicken. Oh my God, I'm going to give you a hard time for that now. There's no longer a code. Okay, so Judy, can you speak to that? Like, what is the code? And was there a time when the culture of the streets said that there were certain things that you just couldn't do? Len, I wish you would join in, man. Guys, look, I wish you guys would come in and join, have discussion with me, because I don't know everything, and I wanna have a discussion. I know you guys are scared of me. You all think I know everything, or you think that I think I know everything, and I don't. What I know, but I want to get a discussion going. So when men beat women, both men and women think that was woman's fault. Some part of Southeast Asia where bride burning or acid attacks happen. Yeah, so, okay, so now, son, you don't want to join the live. Oh, somebody's trying to come in, Morena. Okay, Judy Jones, thank you for joining us. Morena, I don't know, something
Let
was...
me turn my thing off. Where am I?
Okay, Judy Jones.
Okay, I'm gonna turn that off. Yeah, hey, what's up? Peace.
Hey, peace. I'm so glad that you joined.
Yeah, why not? Hey, what's the worst that can happen?
Well, nothing.
Someone doesn't agree with what I said.
Yeah, well,
what's the worst that can happen? And that's not too bad, right? Because we all, our experiences are all different, and
well, this is the thing. It's like it's up to us to create the world that we want to live in. We can sit down and complain that this isn't right and that isn't right, but at the end of the day, we have to make the world what we want it to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's a code anymore. I think when I grew up, like I grew up in New York City during the 70s, mainly. I come into age. I was a teenager in the 70s. I graduated high school 1980.
Yeah.
So I'm 59 last week.
Okay, you got a few years on me.
Yeah, I got some, And I think there was a code back then. You just didn't do certain things, to people.
Yeah.
When you were in gangs, I remember the Savage Skulls, the street gang. The Savage
Skulls, right? You in Bronx?
Well, I lived in Upper Manhattan. I lived in Harlem. I grew up in Harlem.
I didn't know the Savage Skulls were in Manhattan too. I know they were in the Bronx because they were in the
area. But I remember those gangs from that era, right? Mm-hmm. But they were more about social issues too, right? They were more about community, social organizing and things. And so I think you just had, and my brothers were in the street, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you had a code that you no longer have. Yeah. And maybe we no longer have that code, I think, is because of, I think rap music changed a lot of it. I think. We went from the days of when rap first started. It was a feel-good thing, right? Yeah. Feel gang and all them. And then it escalated up to what? Run DMC and all of them. And then after that, we got the whole West Coast influence that we saw more, because I think growing up, I was a little sheltered. as a kid.
Yeah.
We didn't know a lot of things, you know, because our parents, for the most part, you have rules and regulation. They had a code too. And I think for the most part, a lot of the code is gone. So now kids see more. I think the level of respect is not there anymore. And so I think it's an open season, open game on anybody and anything.
Okay. So let me ask you, because we're pretty much in this.
Even when I grew up, even the bad guys who were on the corners, they saw my mother walk by and they said something that was like disrespectful in their conversation and talking to each other. They would say, oh, Miss Jones, I'm sorry, Miss Jones. I'm sorry. That doesn't happen. I noticed the change in the 80s. I noticed
that's
in
what
the crack era. I noticed a change.
That's what I wanted to speak to, because I have my perspective, but I'm like, you know what? I don't know. Did everybody see the same thing that I saw? Because what I noticed, my personal experience, is that I think things started to shift in the late 70s, coming into the early 80s, in terms of this was the time when it seemed like there was an epidemic of teenage pregnancies. That was the first thing. And then by the time we get to like the mid 80s now, it's like we were in the grips of the crack epidemic. And it was something that kind of just like snuck up on us, right? Because we didn't know what the hell was going on. We just noticed, first thing that we noticed was there was all these funny looking people walking around in the street. And then you notice that there's people just like running up to you trying to sell you all kinds of weird things. You know, and then there's like a big uptick in crime, you know, like people getting mugged. And then it's like now there's all these shootouts happening all over the place, you know? So you pretty much agree with that it was like in that time in the 80s when there was like a major shift?
Yeah, because I remember growing up in Harlem during the heroin epidemic.
Yeah.
And even though I remember being taught by my own mother to respect even heroin addicts, or them nodding. I didn't quite know why they were nodding. Yeah. But I remember my mother you still had to call them Mr. and Miss, even though you may seen them out of character.
Yeah.
You know, you still had to give them respect only because, you know, they were older than you. Even though they may be misbehaving and their life was in shambles, but still, you know, you gave them that respect. I mean, that's the way I grew up, and that's the way my other friends grew up.
Yeah.
And I think crack kind of like changed a lot of that. And, you know, I'm all for like people being honest. And then I think too, we got a worldwide platform through rap to show, to like display what was going on in our communities. And I don't think we were conscious of, well, do we really want to show that to the whole wide world? But it was money to be made. So, you know, and now, even though we had people in the community who were rallying against it and were saying, no, we shouldn't do this. I remember Dolores Tucker was one of them. And she went out against the lyrics and all that. And I remember Tupac and them all came out heavy against her. But now in hindsight, looking back, you know, I sort of one of those to think, you know, she had a valid point.
You know, I noticed that like in the 90s, rap really started to change, because that was like the time when the lyrics really started to become very disrespectful towards women, you know, with the bitches and hoes and all of that stuff, you know? And I saw the way it was playing out in the way that men were beginning to interact with women, you know? And I remember I was still in college at this time, and I had like a job. I was like a messenger in Midtown. And, you know, this girl, she was there singing this song. I don't remember who put the song out, but the song was, ain't shit but hoes and tricks, Lucky Brothers,
Mhm.
blah blah blah, and blah blah blah.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I was really shocked at, like people are really making music like this. And she thought it was a joke. I'm like, how can you listen to that kind of? Oh well, they ain't talking about me, But she's walking around the office singing this song. But then now, when the guys are trying to feel her up and stuff, now she's upset,
Right.
not understanding why.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, because you're kind of feeding into a mentality here, and so I think that's part of it. Is like when rap started becoming commercial, you had other people who were not part of our community who had this image of what they thought we were or the way they wanted to see us. And so they began to pump this image out there in the mass media, in the music, in the movies, in the films. And, the bad thing about when you're coming from a background where you're economically deprived, you can be bought.
Yeah, right. And so you have people say the generation of the Paul Robesons or the Cicely Tyson who just passed away, or James Earl Jones, and those people who had decisions to make at a certain point in their career. Well, do I take this role that denigrates Black people?
Yeah.
Or do I wait out for something else? I think they felt more of a civic duty to uphold the image of whatever cultural group they came from. So I'm not going to just say Black people, because you also had Chita Rivera, and you had other people from Latino artists too that had the same burden too. They took that on and they didn't shy away from it, right? So then now when you have all these young kids who coming up in this rap whole era, who have more money than they ever seen, or the opportunity to make more money than they ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they carry the, I don't want to call it a burden, but they didn't carry the responsibility of, you know what, if I put this out, how is my community going to be viewed?
Yeah.
How are they going to look? They didn't come from Jim Crow or that whole era of segregation, Jim Crow and all that, like those previous artists that I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't have that level of responsibility. I guess too, like Pop, they were seeing so much behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Like he saw his mother drug addicted and all that. So how do you message that all, And I have some people who say to me, well, my mother's generation had their music and their stuff too that was very subject, was very scandalizing and all that. And they did, but I didn't find out what sexual healing of that Marvin Gaye song meant until maybe about 5 years ago.
Yeah, but then
it was so coded. It was like you really
that was the thing.
It was very coded song.
Yes, like for example, like push in the bush. Like I don't know what the hell they was talking about.
Yeah, you really didn't know. Like 5 years ago, I really listened to the lyrics, and I remember hearing it blasting as a kid in my mother's house, all over, and I didn't really understand what that meant 5 years ago, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, so that's.
But they were a master of hiding things.
It's like
about hiding. We're going to be head on with it.
Yeah,
this is how it goes. We're not hiding anything.
Exactly.
And when they laid it all out,
it's just
no imagination, no nothing. You just straight hardcore what it was. And I think we paid the price. And I think Black women's image, because I could go traveling certain places, and here I'm an older Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I get looks from other cultural groups that I'm around. I'm like, oh God. And I'm a nurse by profession. So it's not like, I'm not some random chick that didn't do nothing. But, it's like the image of the women I represent precedes me.
Yeah.
So people they'll see certain things jump off and they be like, okay, is she going to come out a bag like we see visually what people tell us these women could be like? Is she going to? And I'm like, okay, Judy just handle it different. You know, you watched, examined, taken apart, and everything else. And I think we did a number to ourselves, and we didn't even realize the number that we were doing to ourselves at the time that we were doing it.
You know something, I think that there's so much truth in what you're saying, because I'm remembering, like my mom, she loved her music from back in the 50s and the 60s. And, so I grew up listening to all of those songs, and things were coded, like, will you still love me tomorrow? If you really sit down and you analyze the lyrics and what they're talking about, it's a girl talking about, she's going to lose her virginity that night, but she's worried, is he going to love her, or is he just like, getting his rocks off? And then he's going to be like, so will you still love me tomorrow? So you can listen to, and it's got the beautiful violins playing, really romantic.
And what would be the equivalent to that song years later would be All I Want to Do Is Zoom, Zoom in Love?
Yeah, like it just became so out there. So when it becomes explicit like that, right? It's like you're not seeing a woman as being a full human being. It's like a woman now is reduced to
a hypersexual.
Yeah. What I can do to you. And I really had to boycott. I started boycotting hip hop when it started taking that turn, because when it got to the point where I'm a school teacher and we're having parties for the kids, and there's no music you can play for them that doesn't have explicitly sexual lyrics, and little kids are grinding on each other.
Yeah, I've seen those videos.
I'm like, you want me to chaperone like the school? But I'm like, no, I can't do this, because I'm going to lose my mind. I'm looking at like sixth graders grinding on each other, because that's what's on the TV. That's what they're seeing. And the lyrics in the music are so explicit. And so, and I saw this, and to me, this was problematic. And I really felt a great deal of trepidation of what is going to happen, because our kids are being programmed. And I think now a lot of this stuff that we're seeing is the result, and
the rabbit's out of the bag, so you can't put him back in.
Exactly. Once that genie's out the bottle, you can't put it back in.
You can't put the genie back in the bottle.
And so I think, but like I said, abuse against women is something that's global. But I think, we need to look at certain factors, and, the agents of misogyny are definitely something that we have to take into consideration. I spent a lot of time, traveling to Egypt. And I have like a former student, she was living in Egypt for like 10 years, just about. She just came back when all the Corona stuff, kicked off. She got to Egypt 1 month before the revolution happened.
Okay.
And
rising.
Yeah. And during that time, like a little bit before that, and during the uprising, sexual abuse against women was off the hook. Even the women, in Egypt, I started noticing a trend of women dressing more conservatively. Like when I first went there in '88, you didn't see any woman hardly with a headscarf on. And then a few years later, it was like you hardly saw a woman without a headscarf. A big shift. And one of the reasons is that a lot of women said, well, if I'm covered, they'll respect me more. Or they were hoping that men would respect them more. But what we were finding out was that even the women that were completely covered, like even the ones that were like complete, like veiled, full veil, even they were being sexually, harassed in the street. There was one video that I saw where it was just like a whole mob of guys. They just went crazy and just started running down the street and just like groping all the women that were there, to the point where like women were hiding in the stores, because these guys were going crazy. And even during the protests in Tahrir Square, there were women who got raped, by like gangs of guys that came. And so I think, there's poverty, economic tensions that fuels frustration. But I think a big part is definitely something that we don't like to talk about. And that is the fact that men feel that they have a right to women's bodies. They feel like they have a right to women's attention. Like they have a right to just walk up to a woman and say anything that they want to. Like they really feel like this is their right as a man. And so when you see what transpired in Harlem, he walks up to this woman. He's trying to flirt with her or whatever. And she's like, no, I'm good. Now his ego as a man is bruised. And so I have to like, I got to save face. So I got to like put her in her place now.
Yeah, but a similar event occurred in Jersey City, I think in December, because my grandson was friends with the young girl whose mother was killed. And the same thing, she passed a group of boys. It seemed like she might have known some of them. And one particular boy, she didn't take his advancement. But then she went upstairs and came back and then shot her or something. So yeah. I don't know if this is a new phenomenon, or I don't know what sparked it. Like what sparked this global, disrespect of women overall. I don't know. I can't really pinpoint. Historically, what happened.
I don't think it's something new. I think a lot of times when we see things and it looks like there's a big epidemic, I think it's just that people are beginning to talk about it. Whereas maybe before, nobody really paid it attention, but now for whatever reason, people are paying attention to it now. So it gets media coverage, and then, you know how it is in the media. This gets attention. Not everybody is jumping on the bandwagon, but I think we do have to, as a culture, we need to listen. I know it's happening everywhere, but I don't live everywhere. You know what I mean?
Right.
I live here in this society, and I think that we, in our society, we need to start reevaluating where we are. I mean, we're in this age where it's like we don't feel like we have any obligations to anyone. It's all about me.
Right. And maybe that is a global thing that can be carried globally, is people don't care about the other person. It's just about me.
I think you have a point there, because the fact that I wasn't taking into consideration is that we live in the age of social media now, right? So we're connected with the world in ways that we never were before. And because we're the United States or whatever, all eyes are on us. So I think, you had alluded to this earlier, that when you travel certain places, you have to take into consideration that something else has preceded you before you got there.
You'll be surprised.
And I experienced that also when, like I was in Egypt again, because Egypt was the one place I was in more than anywhere else.
That you love to go for whatever reason at that time.
Well, various reasons, yeah. So I'm on this boat, and in Egypt, like in Cairo, on the Nile, like on the side of the Nile, they have these big boats. They call them feluccas.
Okay.
And what they do is they rig them out with lights, and they have like a DJ in the back, you know, like playing music, and they take you out on the water for a little spin. And so, you know, I'm watching all the kids and all the people getting up and dancing with their, you know, just having a good time. It's really a lot of fun, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the thing about Egypt is that people are very social, you know, so they strike up conversations real easy. And so this kid, he was like really surprised that I liked Egyptian music. And he says, you know, like his friend, he likes Egyptian music too. It's like, oh, well, what artists do you like? And I'm telling, well, I like, you know, this one, Hakim and Abdel Basit and all these different people. And he's like, yeah, I like Egyptian music too. But my friend, he doesn't like Egyptian music. And I'm like, why? And he said, nah, he only likes, he doesn't like. I said, so what kind of music he likes? He said, oh, he likes nigger music. I was like,
there you go.
I'm like, so I have to like stop and just like think really quick, because the kid that says this to me, he's like your color.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I'm like, okay, we're having this conversation in a mix of Arabic and English. I'm like, does he even know what that word means? So I ask him, do you know what that? So now I realize that what he's trying to say is that his friend likes hip hop music. And so I ask him, do you know what that word means? And he's like, no. So I'm trying to explain to him, it's a bad word for, you know?
Yeah, people that look like me.
Yeah. And he's just like looking at me. And because now my language skills aren't really strong, because the next question is, well, then why do they use this term for themselves if it's a bad term? You know, and that was like, I had that experience several times, you know, and I'm thinking to myself, well, why would they call it that? And it's because if you don't speak English, what must it sound like? Da 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 da. Like that word is the only word that they can pick out.
Yeah, or niggers made the music.
Yeah, you know?
Niggas made the music, so it's nigga music.
Exactly. So I'm like, oh my God, you know.
But that's what I'm saying. America's influence reaches worldwide, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's music coming from our culture, films coming from our culture, or the overall white establishment, you know, that part of the American experience,
yeah,
it goes worldwide. It stretches far, and people are influenced by it. So maybe this whole thing of you no longer have to respect women, you no longer, you know,
I think
they want equality, they want to be equal to us, whatever. Well, this is what you get for being equal.
I think there
I don't know.
I think there must be a lot going on, and especially with the changing roles of women because of the economy. Because even in a lot of these traditional cultures, there's a shift, right? Because you have more and more women entering the workforce, more and more women are becoming educated. So they're not exactly as dependent
on men
before. And with Egypt, for example, what I know for a fact is that there's a big problem when it comes to the availability of who can even think about getting married. Because over there, to get married, you got to come with an apartment, you know, you got to have some place to live. There's a bride price that you have to pay. You know, there's jewelry that has to be bought, furniture that has to be bought.
And that's all on the male's part.
That's all on the man. So, you know, it's like you have to, before you get married, you have to be able to prove to her family that you can support a wife, you know? And a lot of men are not able to do that. So they're frustrated because they can't get married, or they have to put off marriage until they're older and older and older and older. So I think part of the equation here is that men are feeling, perhaps, that, their masculinity is in jeopardy. And so now they have to defend their honor some way, So maybe that's what it is like, I got to put her in her place so that, she doesn't forget to respect me.
Could be. I've seen that at work.
Yeah.
That can happen. Yeah. I've seen that.
So, but I think, we definitely need to have conversations with our boys that, we have to change the way that we relate to each other. The way that we relate to our women has to change. And even though, I'm all for progress and everything, but I kind of like the old-fashioned way of, you had to court a woman. You know what I mean? It's like I miss turning on the radio and hearing those romantic songs. I don't know. It's like I think there's just a basic level of respect for each other that we have lost.
Yes.
And, I think it goes both ways, We need to really sit down and renegotiate like where we're going in our society. Because look, we do have to respect women. It's not about you just beating a woman over her head and imposing. No, you have to work together. There has to be balance in the universe. There's feminine and the masculine, and you can't have life without the both of them, right?
But I think too, women have to respect themselves.
Yeah.
And I think, I remember my mother and her girlfriends having conversations that in my 20s I thought was old-fashioned and didn't matter. And I remember they would say things like, my mother's famous quote was, "No man wants to buy the cow when he could get the milk for free."
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you put that up against a culture that was coming to affect the booty call culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think women of my mother's generation may have participated in it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was so widespread and rampant as it turned out to be in the 80s and all that. In the 90s, it became more acceptable for women to behave that way, for women to be more sexually liberated. And like my mother's, another famous thing my mother used to say, a woman can't do everything a man can do and still be called a woman. Mm-hmm. You can't go in the middle of Fifth Avenue and pull up your skirt and pee in the middle of the street, and men will still respect you, whatever, later on. Yeah. And I used to think, when I'm a 20-year-old now, I used to think that was all, oh, come on. It's all antiquated. It's all, old. It doesn't mean anything. But now in hindsight, I'm like, you know what? These old ladies had a point, because now we threw out the baby in the bath water and everything. So threw everything to caution. And now we don't feel protected. Yeah. I hear that I go on all these social media channels and I hear women say they don't feel protected. But maybe those things that our mothers and our grandmothers try to convey to us was our shield of protection.
Yeah.
Some of it.
And, having said
and we gave it up, largely because of this new culture. We want to play like the boys.
And, having said all of that, it still doesn't excuse the bad behavior. However, I think
when I say this, a lot of women say, "Oh, she's a Me Too. She just wants." Oh, she's, I get called to me too.
She wants
to pick me. No, pick me. They call it a pick me. Oh, she just a pick me. She just want to be like, pick me. And I'm beyond wanting to be picked. Okay.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I had that question in the back of my mind that, in our rush to right the wrongs of the past, right? Because let's be honest, there was a whole lot of ratchetness that was happening with issues of sexism in regards to the way women were treated and the way women were excluded from certain opportunities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of women with the feminist movement, it's like they were trying to correct so much so fast that they went a little bit overboard. So it's like, I can do anything that he does, and that, yeah, we ended up throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I remember speaking to, I had a discussion on a forum. This is before YouTube was a thing, right? There was this woman, and she went to a foreign country, and she met some fellow Americans on the train. And so they invited her back to their place. And so she went. And what happened was that in this particular country, men and women, it's one of these countries where men and women do not socialize in public
together. Yeah.
So the woman goes up to their apartment, which is a big no-no in that culture. And the super comes and he's knocking on the door and he's, screaming he's going to call the police and all of this stuff. And the guys that she met, they like dipped out the window, ran down the fire escape. And the super comes in and he's got like a whole bunch of like businessmen with him.
Mm-hmm.
And they end up gang raping this woman. Now, personally, what I think the whole thing was a setup, right?
Mm.
I think these guys, they were expats living in this country, and them and the super, they had a deal, that they'll get, like unsuspecting women there, and
Mm-hmm.
The clients will pay the super, and they'll get their cut and he gets his cut.
Mm.
And so I've made the statement that, listen, what happened to this woman was inexcusable. But at the end of the day, as a woman, you have to protect yourself.
Yeah.
You have to go out here knowing that there are sharks in the water. And you can't just do everything you want to do. Oh my God, who told me to say that? You're slut shaming. You're blaming the victim. Blah, blah, blah. She had every right to do whatever she pleased. Blah, blah, blah. I'm a woman and nobody's going to tell me who I can socialize with and who. I'm like, sweetie, you're missing the point. I'm not saying that what happened to her was right, but the situation is that she didn't know these dudes from a can of paint. Even if she was here in the United States, in her home country, as a woman, you don't move a certain way. It's one of you and two of them. First of all, you're outnumbered. Okay? And you don't know them from a hole in the wall. Why are you going back to their house? It's bad enough. Oftentimes you have situations where a woman knows, a guy or a group of guys for a long time, and she still ends up getting in an unfortunate situation, much less somebody you only knew for a few hours.
Yeah, attacked or assaulted.
Yeah. It's like you need to listen. You need to know how to avoid unnecessary circumstances that could go south. And that's all I was trying to say. And oh my God, they ripped me a new one.
Yeah.
They ripped me a new one. I'm a sexist. I'm a misogynist. You know, how dare I try to tell a woman how to, you know. So I think, yeah, a lot of women have made this, you know, well, I can express my sexuality. It's like I have the right, like they're weaponizing their sexuality as like it's a badge of strength
Yeah.
somehow. And it's like, no, you know, instead of talking about whatever happened to, does this man deserve my attention in the first place? You know?
Yeah, I think some things there's not an answer for.
Yeah.
Because look, I travel to India quite often.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll have Indian women in very beautiful saris, right? Their belly hanging out. I think an Indian woman wearing a sari is one of the most beautiful things I've seen, right? Mm-hmm. And they don't have no inhibition. I think it's very sensual, what have you. But then you'll have, like, say, white women, tourists who come and now have a short sleeve shirt on, or a boy t-shirt. What do you call it? A white beater.
Yeah.
And a see-through skirt or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the Indian men would just go gaga and just go follow behind them, like, you don't want to talk to them. And I'm like, okay, so what is this phenomenon going on here? Here's your old woman in a beautiful sari, mm-hmm. looking to me, very feminine and sexual and everything all at the same time. But you don't study her like a can of paint. But here comes this foreign woman in westernized American clothes that are see-through, whatever, leave nothing to the imagination. In some cases, you know, they think they could go there and dress the same way. I don't know why, but mm-hmm. But then I have a whole trail of Indian men following behind and trying to talk to them, you know, and this is in South India, sir. Mm-hmm. And they be like, well, they don't understand, like, well, why can't I dress the way I want to dress? But then I don't understand either. Well, if you have women in beautiful saris that have their belly out, have these crop fitting t-shirts, you know, why are you following behind a white woman who's half dressed? But so there's no rhyme or reason, or maybe trying to figure out what's in people's minds and it's psychological that gets them or force them to do whatever it is they do. I don't know. So I go there and I dress in the traditional wear of the women there, you know? Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You know, okay. Could it be that, you know, they're used to seeing that part of the body exposed, so it's no big deal.
Right.
But the rest of the body is covered, right? The rest of the limbs are covered. Yeah. The lower extremities. So maybe from their perspective, seeing a woman in a wife beater and, you know, Daisy Dukes, it's like, well, she's running around in her underwear. Right. You know?
Maybe. And maybe that's what it is. It's one way you see your woman like that all the time, 24 mm-hmm. hours a day, your mother, your sister, your auntie and everything. So it's I don't know if it triggers something in your mind, but when you see a foreign woman mm-hmm. who you hardly see coming to your country, or, you know, it's something different, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. It looks different and attractive to you, opposed to your mother who you see, or women you see in beautiful saris every day.
Because they have they have a code, their code of what is considered conservative dress.
And but then they also have a high sexual assault rate too, I should say.
Yeah. And so, you know, I think this goes back to what I was saying before, that could a lot of this be linked to economic opportunities, and men in these areas feeling socially frustrated because they don't have a certain amount of economic strength, which means that their chances of being able to obtain a wife are like put on hold. And so now they feel less than, you know, they feel less masculine because they don't have that economic strength that a man is supposed to have. So one way that I can assert my strength, my dominance, is sexual domination.
Possibility.
You know, I wonder, like, I wonder about that. You know.
I mean, because it's no doubt that women worldwide are moving up.
Yeah.
You know, and I think largely thanks to American women and the Western women, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
to the Western women and advances the women here in America and Europe have made. So those women in Africa, Asia, and those different places are advancing and have moved forward, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know now, because of those advancements, is this the backlash that they're receiving in those communities?
You know something, I think,
because we get a lot of talk here about how the women here, American women, are aggressive, we're masculine, we're not feminine enough, you know. So, you know, that's the whole dialogue, that the pushback that we're getting. You know, we're feminists, like we're all feminists, we're all not feminine enough, we're all masculine. And, you know, I don't know, maybe people feel threatened, maybe, I don't know. Because maybe because we're doing things different, we're waiting long to get married, we're not having children as quick, we're not depending on a male partner largely to take care of us anymore. So I don't know if that's the pushback now. I don't know. I have no idea.
I know that now. I don't know if there was a spark in sexual assault, but like during the turn of the century, I know that there was a lot of social like anxiety when women started entering the workforce, you know, like secretaries and nurses, because they saw it as like pretty soon, you know, they're going to be wearing the pants. And there was like, everybody was in a state of alarm. So I think in a lot of these countries now, they're just beginning to have that economic revolution, right? Where women are beginning to get that economic independence. And so they feel threatened. So maybe that has a part to do with it. Now, with the situation with these guys in Harlem, I don't know, there's like, why?
The code, lack of code of the street.
Yeah.
You know, you know, because like even for me, if I go to Harlem or Brooklyn or Bronx or different places, I remember I learned this back in the 80s. Because I grew up in an era where, as an older person, you could correct somebody's behavior, a child or whatever, and not, they'll be thankful for it, and they'll be more afraid that you're going to call and tell their mother after you corrected them. So they're like, oh, thank you, whatever, and hoping and pray you don't call their mother and tell their mother what you saw them doing. I remember I got a wake-up call back in the 80s. I saw a young boy that I knew, grew up here where I live, and he was spray painting on the grocery store or something. And I remember I said something to him about it. And the look he gave me and the chastising he gave me, and then I received the chastising from his mother later when I saw his mother, I was like, okay, Judy, things are changing. And this was like right a little bit before the crack epidemic and all that started, you know? So I noticed a shift.
So his mother was mad at you?
Yeah, but his mother was one of those young mothers too. She wasn't an older mother like the generation that I was used to prior, like my mother's generation. She was one of those young mothers, might have been a teenage mother or young when she had him. So, and her reaction was different from my mother's generation. My mother's generation would have been more like, what? You did what? You know, they would have wanted to know, well, what did you do? You know, what were you doing? Da 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 da. And Miss Jones saw you and she had the da 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 da. That's the way it was. So I remember there was a shift occurring. So I took that as a mental note. not to chastise people kids anymore.
Wow.
And I think maybe a lot of people had that similar experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and especially during the wild days of the whole crack epidemic from
yeah. I
these
mean,
onwards.
it was wild west.
Yeah, you weren't taking that level of responsibility because the parents weren't going to back you up.
Exactly. And then, you know, I think it even translates to the schools because, I mean, like, it was a very traumatic, my experience as a school teacher was extremely traumatic because it was like you had to be on pins and needles to make sure you said the right thing all the time. I remember one school, it was so crazy. There was one school I was working in, and every Friday they would have like a little meeting, you know, like with all the kids, and it was kind of like a group therapy session where they could talk about their problems and stuff like that. And so there's this one girl, like every time someone's going to speak, it's like she would interrupt them. And so I said, you know, sweetie, you know, like, you know, you have to let that other person speak. You know, you had your turn to speak, but it's time for her to speak now. You know, when you do that, what you're the message you're giving that person is that you don't care about them. You know, so you need to show them the same amount of respect and consideration that you would like them to show you. Guess who gets called into the principal's office? I heard you had a confrontation with a student, Mr. B. You're so confrontational. I'm like, because I was telling her that, you know, she needed to respect the conversation. I'm confrontational. And oh my God, I remember another instance. It's like they were giving out letters, you know, that we had to send home with the kids. And oh, don't say take this home to your mother because, you know, some of these kids, they don't have mothers. And if you say mother, they'll be emotionally scarred. Don't say take this home because, you know, some of these children, they're living in a homeless shelter. And if you say home, they'll be emotionally scarred. And it was like all of this, without sounding like, you know, like a far right conservative, it was all of this liberal ideology, like, you know, don't hurt, like the kids are made out of eggshells and you can't break them. And I think we've suffered for that. We've suffered in the quality of the education because, you know, like back in the day, even in Harlem, like back in the 40s and the 50s, you know, kids got a decent education because the teachers had high expectations, you know? But these days, it's like these people, they come in and I don't know if it's, you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions or what it is, but it's like, oh, we don't want to hurt your feelings, so, you know, we're going to make it easier for you to pass the test, and, you know, and so you give these kids like all this freedom, and kids are going to be kids. They're going to go crazy, you know. So you're in a situation where you can't say anything because you could lose your job. If the kid says, oh, well, Mr. B said the wrong thing to me, you know, like, you know, it's like as a teacher, you're on the defensive the whole time. And I think we're paying a price. I think we are paying a price for all of that stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And so we're seeing craziness like that where people are getting beat up, women are getting beat up in public, and people are afraid to step in. People are afraid to come forward. Even if they know what happened, you know, nobody wants to get involved because they're afraid there's going to be retaliation.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, like to answer the question of the live stream, is this situation we see in Harlem reflective of all black men, and should we blame all black men for this? No, absolutely not. But there are certain people who do have these ideas in their minds, you know, like the whole mess that we see on YouTube with certain black men calling black women out their name and vice versa. There's a certain toxic divisiveness happening there, and that needs to be addressed. So while what happened to this woman is, you know, it was heinous and it shouldn't be, we don't need to take a bad situation and make it even worse by turning it into something that it's not. You know, like black men hate black women. You know, black men are the only men that don't protect their women. I mean, that is just not true. There's a lot of people in this world, a lot of communities in this world that are in different kinds of crisis and exhibiting different levels of dysfunctionality. It has nothing to do with race or nationality. It's a human dynamic. And what we need to be doing is figuring out how do we get in front of this and change it so that the next generations coming are safer.
Right. Well, I definitely believe we're in crisis. That is for certain. And now what do we do? How do we maneuver to help each other understand that we're in crisis?
Yeah.
And then what are the solutions that we put forth to move forward out of crisis? Because yeah, I definitely can agree with that we're in crisis. And blaming each other doesn't help.
That doesn't help at all.
At all.
And I find it really disheartening because I look at, I mean, I'm not an African American, but I certainly do know that I owe a lot to the African American community who fought for a lot of the freedoms that I just take for granted now. I mean, like being able to be a citizen, you know, for one thing, you know, because I'm born here, which is not something that happens in a lot of places around the world. I don't think most people who come to the America or even born here really know. You know, we take it for granted that if you're born here in this country, you have automatic citizenship. I got friends that was born in Kuwait, Dubai. They're not citizens, even though they don't know their home country from a can of paint.
Right.
You know? And when I look and I see how much they did, I'm like, you know, we don't have an excuse for not doing better. You know, the people that came before us, they had to go through a hell of a lot more than what we're going through now. And mind you, we're going through something right about now, you know, but they had it much worse.
And maybe what we find ourselves in is because of the pushback of all that we did, that we had to get from point A, from Jim Crow, the segregation, to here. You know, so that's the price we paid. Okay, so integration. We paid the price for that.
Yeah.
So now we need to like sit back and analyze it and see, okay, well, what did we have that was of good and we gave away and we just treated it like it wasn't important? Well, maybe we need to get back to some of those things that were of value.
That's a whole other conversation right there.
You know, you mentioned something earlier about dating, right? You miss the way people used to date, right? And I remember a few years ago, I said to myself, I miss the way people would dress up and go to a concert.
Yeah, you know, I mean,
something as simple as that. People used to get dressed to the nines and go out to see Whitney Houston at Radio City Music Hall or whatever. And I noticed a shift Somewhere in the 90s, where I would see people come in flip-flops and, all kinds.
Listen,
I'm like, damn, people don't get dressed up anymore.
One of the things that depresses me, like when I go traveling, and look, let's not get it twisted. I've been to a lot of places, but I always bring my ass on back, But having said that, I think there's a lot that we could learn from other cultures, because whenever I'm away for a little while and I come back, it's a certain amount of culture shock, because the average people on the street, they just dress so ugly. I mean, when did walking around looking like you homeless become a fashion statement? Like back in my day, when your jeans are ripped up, you threw them out and you got more jeans. I don't understand this, the slovenly people coming out of their house looking all slovenly. And girl, why are you out here wearing your shower cap on your head?
And I don't know if it's the level of stress that we're under. Like, I didn't realize how much stress I was under until I started meditating.
Yeah.
When I started meditating, like, meditation gives you an opportunity to like really see yourself, and then when I started meditating and I started to see the things that I used to react to, my triggers.
Yeah.
And then I would see how certain stuff would trigger me. And I'm like, oh my God, is that the way I behaved? Oh, I didn't know. And I didn't realize how much stress I was under until, I started picking up meditation as something to do. Sometimes we're not even aware of how the environment has affected us and changed our behavior. We don't even have a clue. So I think a lot of this too is stress generated, that we're under so much stress to make a living, to live a certain way, to meet expectations and deadlines and things that we done put in our head that is so important to us that, we don't realize the level of stress that we live under.
I think you hit a very important point when you mentioned meditation, because we've been under and this goes across the board. This is, people who are living in a certain areas where they're dealing with certain economic and social dynamics. There's a chronic stress that we have to deal with, and we have not been given tools on how to deal with that stress. So perhaps part of this is something that goes global, right? Because the one common denominator that we can see is that we have communities where people are under chronic stresses, whether it be financial or social or all of the above.
Exactly.
And they don't have any tools. I have all of this anger and all of these feelings, but what do I do with that? So I think, one of the things that we should,
so we lash out on each other, right? So
we take it out on each other because we've not been given the tools on how to express all of these heavy emotions constructively. So you take it out on your kids. And, I know you've seen it because we grew up in the same area. You see these young mothers and they got these kids and they cussing out their kids because she's under so much stress and she doesn't have the tools. She's not been taught how to deal with it. And she probably doesn't even have any social support network to help her. So,
yeah, well, I come from a generation, the mother would just look at you.
Yeah,
and be like.
But you see, but they were raised by a family.
But now I hear mothers say things 5, 6, 7, 10 times. I'm like,
yeah. But now this is the consequence of you have these young women getting pregnant and having kids. You were a kid when you had a kid. So how do you know you don't even know how to deal with yourself, much less you're going to deal with this crazy little thing bouncing off the walls,
another human being.
another human being that's just like totally insane. Like, and what do you do with that? So I mean, I think one of the things is like if we could teach like in the school how to meditate. This is how you do when you're feeling this way. This is what you do to get rid of that emotion. We've been under intergenerational chronic stress, and we've not been given any tools in how to handle the stresses that we're confronted with on a daily basis. I mean, it was so interesting that you said meditation because that's what I tapped into. You know, like as a person who struggled with chronic anxiety and depression, meditation has saved my life. You know, because it gave me a way of being able to let go. And I'm telling you, it's like you sit in like a little meditation session and you can feel like you got the weight of the world on your shoulders. And when you're finished, you feel like a brand new copper penny, you know?
Because that few minutes of taking layers and layers of stress, every session
Yeah.
participated takes layers and layers of stress off of you and prepares you for the new battle. Okay, let me go out here and deal with this again, you know? And then when you spend that 20 minutes to half an hour, you know, whether you use a mantra-based practice or you just follow your breath, and you, you know, you're giving yourself a chance to release that stress.
Yeah.
That we carry, and all of us carry it.
And I think, you know, that's the thing when you say meditation to people, a lot of people have a misconception of what meditation is. They think, okay, I'm not supposed to have any thoughts. You know, like, no.
Which is not true, right?
Which is not true. You know, so I think a lot of people get turned off because they try it.
Right.
Like, well, I can't stop thinking about stuff, you know?
Right.
Okay, I just can't do this.
Right. Because the mind will never not have thoughts. When the mind doesn't have thoughts, you're dead.
Exactly.
So the mind is always going to think. It's just a matter of not paying attention to the thought and just staying focused on your breath and just let the mind do what the mind does. And that's think a thought and just let it go.
Yeah.
You know, it was a practice I wanted to start in my 20s, and I tried to. And I remember when I first sat down to do it, I was still having all these thoughts. I had like a very monkey mind, right?
Yeah.
But when you're that young, yeah, your mind is like, you got a monkey mind. It's all over the place. So I had that same understanding that meditation means no thoughts. So I gave up. And it wasn't until I was like in my 40s where I was reintroduced to it. And I remember I had some Oprah things on, Oprah and Deepak Chopra on my phone. And I remember I put it on and I was like, all of a sudden I wasn't so focused on the thoughts. And I was like, oh, I can meditate now. Okay, this is easy. But it took crisis, like I was going through a crisis at the time. So it took crisis, and I guess being older to not, you know, be so invested in the thoughts I was thinking.
Yeah.
To make me realize, oh, you can meditate, you can do this.
And I think for a lot of people also, it might be a thing where, and particularly I think for a lot of guys, to even entertain the thought of meditation, you know, means that I have to confront my stuff or the fact that I have issues. And the fact that I have issues is a sign of weakness. Because, you know, a man is supposed to be strong, you know, you like nothing bothers you, like everything slides off your back, you know. And I think a lot of men are afraid of opening up that vulnerable space, right? To sit there and to look at your stuff and to look at the things that make you feel, to admit it to yourself. First of all, I think that's the first part, is to be able to admit to yourself that you have these weaknesses or what you perceive to be weaknesses. And to then go into the process of deconstructing it so you can let it go. But if you've been conditioned to think that you're supposed to be, nothing phases me, like men don't cry, and you start going into a session of meditation and now you want to cry, that scares the crap out of you, because you feel like you're losing control. And being a man means you're in control, so I think we need to recondition our minds that being vulnerable and having feelings is not the same thing as being weak.
Right.
And I think that's the big thing for a lot of men, is that we're afraid of being perceived of as weak, especially in the streets, because you're conditioned, if you show any sign of weakness, the sharks are in the water and they can smell blood, so you have to keep that facade. And I think some people invest so much in putting up that facade that they can't even open up to themselves to admit that I have a problem.
Right. Well, yeah, and especially in that situation at the liquor store, you got a group of guys together.
Yeah.
So that's like a recipe for a disaster, what you just described, right? Who in that group is going to say to whoever, man, leave her alone, it's not worth it, whatever, just let it go, let it ride,
But then you're going to have, oh, she dissed you, she punked you, yo, you going to let her get away with that? Like, we get into, men in general, we get into so much trouble because of peer pressure.
Right.
So many of us, we do dumb things. We end up losing our lives based on peer pressure because somebody said, or I was afraid somebody was going to say, blah, blah, blah. So I had to prove myself and XYZ. So I wonder how much of what happened, like you said, was really down to that just childish mentality. I got to show my strength.
I think a lot of it, unfortunately, is.
Yeah, so we have to come up with better coping mechanisms for our children and especially our young men, and let them know that it's okay to feel unsure, uncertain, afraid, but you don't have to stay there. We have ways that you can deal with this and let that stuff go. You don't have to carry that burden.
And then how many of these young guys are medicating themselves?
Well,
constant street medication, weed, liquor, you don't really get to, and then now you go to jail, and once all that stuff comes off, then you see what you did, and you're like, oh my God, if I could turn back the hands of time, but a lot of these young kids too are on street medications, medicate themselves day in, day out.
Well, then, you just look at our communities and like there's a liquor store on every damn corner, so even before the hard drugs came in, they were already, softening people up to be dependent on, chemical remedies. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Liquid medicine to take away the pain rather than finding out ways of investigating what's going on inside of you and releasing it with something like meditation. Instead of meditation, they resort to all forms of medication. And now they even pushing it in the schools, getting these kids all doped up on Ritalin and all these other, things. So when they become older now, it's like I learn, instead of dealing with my feelings, I swallow my feelings.
Or give me a pill.
Or give me a pill. You got to give me something that's going to change my mood,
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's one solution, but I don't know how we would implement this on a larger scale. But definitely, I think, having conversations and just addressing the fact that a lot of our young people are coping with chronic
stress issues. I think so.
And we need to teach them better ways, more effective coping mechanisms, and meditation. I definitely know that there are schools where they have time where they teach the kids yoga.
Yeah.
I've been to schools like that. I've seen schools like that. And I think in our neighborhoods, we really need that, We need to just really break down the whole education system and restructure it. And there's a lot that needs to be done within our communities because we are carrying multiple generations of chronic stress.
Yes, we are. For sure.
Well, Judy, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed my conversation with you.
Likewise. I'm going to wrap it up now, but I really appreciate you coming on here, so I wasn't just a talking head. Lorena, next time I saw you were trying to jump in and there was like an error thing, but next time I want you to come in and chop it up because I know you have a lot of valuable information to share. So you see, I keep it classy over here. There's no craziness, so you don't have to be afraid. But everybody, thank you so much for coming out here. And, let's continue the conversation across different YouTube platforms, wherever you may be. Let's get ahead of this thing. We have to start the healing. A lot of us, we are in pain. And if it's one thing that I've learned on YouTube this past year, looking at all these different communities, like I fell down the Dominican rabbit hole, y'all, But the one thing that I'm noticing is that at the end of the day, we're all dealing with pain. That's basically what it is. We're all dealing with pain, and we're all trying to work it out. Some people have better ways of doing it than others. Some people have really toxic ways because they just never got the information or the skills of how to deal with it better. And some of us are really good at it. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. We're all dealing with pain, And that's why one of the reasons why I have this channel, because I want my channel to be a place where we can stop the rhetoric and really get to the nitty-gritty of what is going on within ourselves so that we can create a better world, not just for ourselves, but for the people that we interact with and for the children and the generations that are coming after us, So with that, everybody, you all be blessed. Thank you for coming out. And I'm going to be making more content, putting more content out on my channel. So if you haven't given this a thumbs up, give it a thumbs up before you leave. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell. Also, utilize my channel. I have great resources in my channel. If you want information to uplift yourself, to empower yourself, to educate yourself, if you're a person of the African diaspora, whether you identify as Black or mixed or however you choose to identify, if you want information that will give you a positive perspective on African history and the community, the descendants of the African diaspora, and what we have contributed to the world, what we are contributing to the world, look in my playlists. I have playlists on many different topics with great videos in there. So people, listen, even though we may be facing certain stresses, certain tensions, whether you are Latino, whether you are African American, whether you are Caribbean, whatever you may be, whoever you may be, right? We have the greatest thing available to us, and it's this, our mind. We all have the human mind. This is the greatest tool that you will ever have. It's all a matter of how you use it. And do you train yourself? How you train yourself to use it to better your life, right? So there is absolutely no reason for any of us to feel less than, to feel threatened, to feel like we got to put somebody else down to build ourselves up. We all have done great things, and each and every one of us is capable of doing great things because we've got this. We've got the human brain, we've got the human mind. And that right there is what you need. If you have that and you know you got it, you can achieve anything that you want to in this world. You already have the power within yourself to make your life what you want it to be. Regardless of whatever tensions or problems that you are facing or that we are facing in our communities, we are not defined, none of us, we are not defined by the dysfunctional elements in our societies. Okay? We have the power to make the world a better place. And we are doing it. We are doing it. It's just a matter of where we choose to focus our attention. We can focus our attention on the ratchet shit that's happening in the media, and unfortunately, they love to show us the ratchetness. Or we can choose to focus on the positive things that we are doing, the things that uplift us. And we are doing a lot of things. So if you are African American or Latino, explore within your community the contributions that your people and your ancestors have made to the world. And once you find one thing, it's like it has a snowball effect. You will find so many things. You need to be looking at that stuff to build yourself up. That's one way that we deal with the chronic stress that we have in our lives. To be able to have that hope and inspiration that life can be better. One of the reasons why we see this dysfunction in our communities is because a lot of our people, especially our young people, have lost hope. They don't see a hope in the future. They don't have anything to look forward to. Once you've gotten to that point where you have no hope, why won't you go out and beat somebody over the head because they looked at you the right way, in the wrong way, I should say, or let me loot because I got the opportunity to do it. And you come from a system where you've got a crappy education, and the teachers told you that you weren't about nothing, so you believed it because maybe unfortunately your parents at home told you wasn't anything. But you don't know that the reason why they told you that is because they themselves were told that they weren't nothing and they didn't believe in themselves. So they didn't have that strength within themselves for their own self. So what could they have given to you? So if that's the case, if that's part of your experience or someone that know this, you do not have to carry the weight of that burden around with you for the rest of your life. Whatever happened in the past, it happened in the past. We can't go back there and change it. But what we can do is we can learn to start loving ourselves. Because 99% of the negative messages that we're given or that we have in our minds and in our hearts about ourselves is not our own stuff. It's stuff that we got from other people who unfortunately didn't know any better because they were not taught how to handle the pressures of life in an effective way. And so they gave us the best that they had, and unfortunately the best that they had to give us was crap. But we don't have to remain victims. We can throw out the crap and we can start all new and start building up something better so that we have something better to give the generations coming after us. So it's there. Go down in my playlist and look at all of that stuff. I have so many great videos in my playlist. Use it as a tool to empower yourself. Okay? So everybody, love you. Much love, light, peace, and prosperity to everybody. I'll see you next time. All right. Love you. Bye-bye.